I'm Dr. Duke with the New American. And today we see more gun violence in the news. We had a terrible shooting in Texas. Before the gun was even warm, the guns were even warm, the Democrat apparatus was out there politicizing this. And it gets more and more strident, doesn't it? We now have Joe Biden, who is considered to be more or less the mainstream Democrat candidate. He's supposed to be the middle-of-the-road guy with all these left-wingers on his side pushing him farther left. But, boy, he sure sounds like a nut, an anti-gun nut the more he talks. It's hard to differentiate Biden's take on guns from Elizabeth Warren's or Bernie Sanders. He's now arguing in his sort of stilted way that he wants to ban any magazine, any clip in a gun that contains more than one bullet, which is to say pretty much every gun. Now, does he actually mean that? I don't know. We don't know if he understands what he's saying. He is still the walking gaffe machine he was 10 years ago when he ran with Obama. Nevertheless, the rhetoric here is getting really heated with guns. We've talked a lot on this show over the last few weeks about the Second Amendment and how Second Amendment's under assault. I'd like to transition, though, and talk a little bit about the First Amendment. The First Amendment is the amendment that guarantees all our other rights. The Second Amendment exists because, in many ways, we have a First Amendment. And when you look at the way lefties, progressives, are attacking the First Amendment with the same unconstitutional rabidness that they're going after guns, it may be as big or an even bigger problem. We, in Hollywood this weekend past, we had a number of Hollywood celebrities, including the two stars of that vilely reprehensible Will and Grace show. Just never found it funny. Shockingly unfunny. Very hyperbolic, very loud, very over the top. But you had Debra Messing and you've got Eric McCormack, the two stars of that show, who both in their own way, McCormack came out and said, basically, what we need to do is there was a big fundraiser for Donald Trump being held. I believe it was out in California. And this, of course, enraged the progressive left. And McCormack said something to the effect of, well, we ought to force these Hollywood supporters of Donald Trump are going to go to this rally. We're going to pay all this money for a seat at the table. They should be forced to admit who they are publicly. We have the right to know who they are so we can determine who it is as Hollywood we do not want to work with. This is blacklisting. What they want to do is blacklist these people, and they're very open about it. Debra Messing, who's also, she ranks right up there with Alyssa Milano for progressive female big mouth of Hollywood. She came out and seconded what McCormack said, her former co-star, to the effect that we should not have to work with conservatives. If there are conservatives in Hollywood, if there are conservative producers or directors or gaffers or screenwriters or actors and actresses, they should be forced to identify themselves so we can prescribe them. I mean, it really is creepy. This is the same group that pretends to fight Joe McCarthy and McCarthyism, right? The funny thing about Joe McCarthy, say what you will about the man and his tactics, but he was 100% correct about the fact that Hollywood had been infiltrated by communists. And there's very little that separates that 50, 60, 70 years ago from what you're hearing now from actors and actresses like McCormack and Messing. They literally want a litmus test. If you support Donald Trump or you support his policies, if you support the GOP, you should be forced to identify that so we can then know who it is we shouldn't be doing business with. It's a very, very dangerous situation to be in. It's problematic. And it's bigger than that, though. It's bigger than just Hollywood. And to be fair, even somebody as left-wing as Whoopi Goldberg on her ridiculous show, The View, came out and condemned Messing and McCormack for what they said, pointing out correctly that this is anti-American. And there were some other lower-ranking Hollywood stars. John O'Herlihy, who, if you ever watch Seinfeld, he's perhaps most famous for the role of J. Peterman and the J. Peterman catalog. Rather a thoughtful, contemplative fellow. He came out and condemned this as well. He considers himself a traditional liberal. He does not have a lot of sympathy for Donald Trump, but he recognizes, too, O'Herlihy does, that this kind of discourse is leading us down a very, very dangerous road. The idea of prescribing people. Back in the old Roman Empire, when you had triumvirs vying for power, they would get together and they would proscribe, put little black marks by all the people in their new regime that had to be killed to make way for their own particular new world order. And this kind of prescription, right, this kind of list of enemies who have to be blackballed, blacklisted, removed, it really is the kind of creepy thing that traditional liberals used to fight all the time, but progressives now are opting for left and right. And so I'll give you another example of how speech is under assault. We had the Straight Pride Parade in Boston, Massachusetts. This made international news. And what was it? A Christian organization in Boston wanted to fly the Christian flag on a public flagpole in Boston. Boston is notoriously, they have this flagpole. They fly all the TB flags. They fly all the progressive causes flags. The transgender flag is flown there. It's just a flagpole that anybody, a citizen of Boston, can apply to have a particular flag flown. Well, about a year ago, they absolutely refused to fly the Christian flag. They were not going to do it. Hal Shurtleff of Camp Constitution actually took them to court. It is making its way through the courts now, this lawsuit. And so a group of people saw that and they approached Cal and said, hey, wait a second. You wouldn't fly the Christian flag, even though they've flown all these other flags. Would they consider flying the straight pride flag? That's a new flag asserting respect for heterosexuals. And predictably, the city of Boston refused to do it. More freedom of speech and expression being rejected. So the people who did this, the straight pride flag, decided they were going to push it even further. Well, if we can't get our flag to fly, let's see if we can get a parade, a straight pride parade. City of Boston duly shut it down. You will not be able to say those things. You will not be able to march in Boston. Well, court action ensued. The organization for pushing the straight pride parade, they forced the city to actually allow them to be able to march against their will. Mayor of Boston condemned vehemently this parade. They called it white supremacy, even though a number of the speakers, at least half the speakers, happened to be African American of the straight pride parade. The host was Milo Yiannopoulos, who is a gay, outspoken advocate for traditional values in this country. So this was not gay bashing. This was not white supremacy. And there were about 400 marchers who marched this past weekend to exercise their freedom of speech and free rights. Well, about 600 Antifa showed up. So you had about 400 straight pride marchers, and you had 600 Antifa. There were 36 different arrests. 4 Boston police officers were injured. Guess who all of the 36 were? All 36 were members of Antifa. There was not a single marcher in the straight pride parade who misbehaved, who swore or cussed or spit. We know for a fact, we have the tape of this, the actual marchers in the parade were spit on. They were mocked. The vulgarity on the flags and the pennants and the signs that were being held by Antifa. Antifa tried to delay the parade. They tried to stop the parade. They tried to censor speech. They threatened bullying. They threatened violence. 36 of them were ultimately arrested. So bad is it, though, that, again, you have 2 left-wing women. You've got Presley and you've got Ocasio-Cortez, who were in the news as soon as the parade was ending, demanding that the Antifa who had been arrested for violence were to be released. And they're now trying to raise money, these 2 Democrat politicians, to raise bail money for the Antifa who tried to destroy this incredibly peaceful parade. Small, homegrown, grassroots groups of organizations who put this parade on. So you see the danger that we face from the loss of the First Amendment. We're very close to progressives in Hollywood, progressives in academia, progressive warriors on the streets, social justice warriors, now treating speech as violence. To the progressive left, your speech is violence if it's speech that disagrees with them. And therefore, they feel justified in purveying actual violence against you for speaking in ways that they don't like. This is the threat we faced. And as dangerous and as short-sighted and as juvenile and as unconstitutional as the progressive left is when it comes to the confiscation of guns, there's no shooting that they can't turn into a political moment for themselves. What they're doing to free speech here, quietly, nobody's talking about. Nobody's really talking much about this. Guns are tangible things that you can ban, but banning words, banning phrases, banning speech is really banning ideas. And there is absolutely no place for this in a constitutional republic. And we need to wake up. The same vehemence with which we defend our gun rights, we absolutely have to double down and defend our speech rights as well. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dr. Duke with the New American Magazine, and this has been my take on this week's news.